$15. The cost of a pizza, a movie ticket, 2 cups of coffee. For most of us, it's loose change we'd find between couch cushions or forget in yesterday's jeans. But on a quiet Sunday in Minneapolis, this seemingly insignificant amount became the price of a human life. 25-year-old Adnan Abdirahman, had no idea that a simple disagreement over $15 would be his last conversation. He couldn't have known that his 21-year-old roommate, Sincere Malik Porter, had already made a deadly decision. A decision that would transform their shared apartment into a crime scene painted with blood. What transforms an ordinary person into a killer over pocket change? What darkness lives inside someone who can end a life over the cost of a fast food meal? These aren't questions we want to ask ourselves, but they're questions we must face when we examine the horrifying reality of what happened on Hiawatha Avenue. The surveillance cameras captured every second of the argument, every word exchanged, every movement made. But what they revealed wasn't just a spontaneous act of violence. What they showed was far more disturbing than anyone could have anticipated. The footage told a story that would shake investigators to their core. What transforms an ordinary person into a killer over pocket change? What darkness lives inside someone who can end a life over the cost of a fast food meal? These aren't questions we want to ask ourselves, but they're questions we must face when we examine the horrifying reality of what happened on Hiawatha Avenue. The surveillance cameras captured every second of the argument, every word exchanged, every movement made. But what they revealed wasn't just a spontaneous act of violence. What they showed was far more disturbing than anyone could have anticipated. The footage told a story that would shake investigators to their core. The roommates were lucky they didn't get in the way. Porter told police with disturbing calm. Lucky, as if their survival was merely a matter of timing rather than his restraint. This wasn't just about $15. This was about a young man who had been living among unsuspecting victims, planning their deaths while sharing meals, conversations, and everyday moments. If you've ever wondered how quickly a normal day can turn deadly, you need to stay with me until the end of the story. Because what you're about to hear will change how you see the people closest to you forever. The roommates were lucky they didn't get in the way. Porter told police with disturbing calm. Lucky, as if their survival was merely a matter of timing rather than his restraint. This wasn't just about $15. This was about a young man who had been living among unsuspecting victims, planning their deaths while sharing meals, conversations, and everyday moments. If you've ever wondered how quickly a normal day can turn deadly, you need to stay with me until the end of the story. Because what you're about to hear will change how you see the people closest to you forever. Near the front of the residence, officers made a discovery that sent chills through their spines. A knife lay abandoned, its blade still wet with fresh blood. The weapon that had ended a life just moments before their arrival. The silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the sound of their footsteps as they carefully navigated around the evidence. In the center of this nightmare lay a young man, motionless on the living room floor. 25-year-old Adnan Abdirahman, had been stabbed in the neck, his life draining away in the place he called home. The same apartment where he had shared meals, laughter, and conversations with the person who would ultimately take his life. Paramedics rushed Abdirahman to a nearby hospital, fighting desperately to save him. But the damage was too severe, the wound too deep. His journey ended there. Abdirahman wasn't just another statistic. He was a son, a friend, a young man with dreams and aspirations that would never be fulfilled. At 25, he had his whole life ahead of him. He had chosen to share his living space with roommates, probably to save money or enjoy companionship. He never could have imagined that this decision would cost him everything. The investigators began interviewing witnesses who had been present during the attack. Their accounts painted a terrifying picture of how quickly violence had erupted in what should have been a safe space. One witness told police that Porter had made a disturbing statement immediately after the stabbing. He said that Abdirahman had made him flash out, as if the victim was somehow responsible for his own murder. But the most crucial evidence was yet to be discovered. Hidden within the apartment was a surveillance camera that had been silently recording everything. This electronic witness had captured the entire deadly encounter, preserving every second of the argument that led to murder. The footage would become the prosecution's most powerful weapon, but for the investigators watching it for the first time, it was pure horror. The camera had recorded not just the final moments of Abdurrahman's life, but the cold calculation of his killer. Every word spoken, every gesture made, every step that led to the fatal blow. The technology that was meant to provide security had instead become a window into the darkest corners of human nature. As detectives prepared to review the footage, they had no idea they were about to witness something that would challenge everything they thought they knew about this case. The truth was far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Sincere Malik Porter, 21 years old, a name that would forever be associated with senseless violence and calculated murder. To his roommates, he was just another young man sharing the rent and the responsibilities of apartment living. They had no idea they were sharing their home with someone who viewed them not as friends or companions, but as potential victims. Porter wasn't a stranger who broke into their home. He wasn't a random attacker who targeted them from the shadows. He was someone they trusted enough to live with, someone who knew their routines, their vulnerabilities, their daily habits. He had access to their most private moments, their sleeping schedules, and their sense of security. While his roommates went about their normal lives, Porter was quietly observing them, studying them, and making plans that would have destroyed multiple families. The young man who helped pay the bills was secretly planning to end lives. After the stabbing, Porter fled the scene like any guilty person would, but his escape was short-lived. Police officers scoured the neighborhood, following leads and witness descriptions until they found him just blocks away from the crime scene. When they approached him, expecting denials or attempts to run, Porter's response was shockingly casual. "Yeah, you got me," he said, as if he had been expecting this moment all along. No panic, no surprise, no attempt to claim innocence, just a simple acknowledgement that his time was up. It was the kind of response you'd expect from someone caught shoplifting, not someone who had just committed murder. The officers read Porter his Miranda rights, informing him of his right to remain silent. But Porter had no intention of staying quiet. What came next would reveal the true depth of his disturbing mindset and leave investigators questioning how they had missed such obvious danger signs. During questioning, Porter's confession was as disturbing as it was matter-of-fact. He admitted to stabbing Abdurrahman without hesitation, showing no remorse for taking a life over $15. But his admission went far beyond this single act of violence. Porter revealed something that made seasoned investigators realize they were dealing with a much more dangerous individual than they had initially thought. He told police that he had been thinking about killing Abdurrahman for weeks. Not days. Not hours. Weeks. This wasn't a spontaneous act of rage or a moment of poor judgment. This was premeditated murder that had been carefully considered over an extended period of time. Porter had been living with his victim, sharing meals and conversations, all while planning his death. But the most terrifying revelation was yet to come. Porter's murderous thoughts hadn't been limited to just one roommate. His plans had been far more extensive and deadly. Porter's confession took an even darker turn when he revealed that Abdurrahman wasn't his only intended victim. He admitted to police that he had also thought about killing his other roommates in the past. Multiple people had been living under the same roof as someone who was actively planning their murders, completely unaware of the danger they faced every single day. The roommates were lucky they didn't get in the way. Porter told investigators, with disturbing calm. Lucky, as if their survival was purely coincidental rather than a conscious choice on his part. This statement revealed the cold calculation behind his actions and the casual way he viewed human life. Porter's words painted a horrifying picture of what could have happened if circumstances had been different. How many more families would have been destroyed? How many more lives would have been lost? The apartment that should have been a safe haven had been a potential death trap for everyone living there. The surveillance footage begins like any ordinary day. Two roommates in their shared living space, going about what should have been routine interactions. But within minutes, this ordinary scene would transform into a nightmare that no family should ever have to witness. The camera captured everything with cold, mechanical precision, preserving the final moments of a young man's life. The argument started over $15. $15. an amount so small that most people wouldn't even notice it missing from their wallet. But for Porter, this minor financial dispute became the trigger he had been waiting for, the excuse he needed to act on thoughts he had been harboring for weeks. The footage shows both men standing in the living room, their voices rising as the disagreement intensifies. What started as a simple conversation about money quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. Abdirahman had no idea that his roommate had already decided this would be their final conversation. Porter had been planning this moment, and now he had found his justification. As investigators analyzed the footage frame by frame, they could see the exact moment when a simple disagreement crossed the line into deadly territory. Porter's body language shifted from argumentative to predatory. His movements became more calculated, more purposeful. He wasn't just angry about the money anymore. He was preparing to kill. The camera captured Porter retrieving a knife, his actions deliberate and methodical. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision to grab the nearest weapon. Porter knew exactly what he was doing and where to find what he needed. The weeks of planning were now coming to fruition, with $15 serving as nothing more than a convenient excuse. Abdirahman continued arguing, completely unaware that his roommate was now armed and ready to strike. The victim was focused on resolving their financial dispute, believing this was just another roommate disagreement that would blow over. He had no reason to suspect that Porter had already made the decision to end his life. The psychological advantage belonged entirely to the killer. The footage reveals a chilling detail that would haunt investigators for months. Porter was seen switching the knife from one hand to the other, a movement that suggested calculation rather than impulse. This wasn't someone acting in blind rage. This was someone making tactical decisions about how to most effectively use a deadly weapon. Abdirahman, still focused on their financial disagreement, had no idea that death was now just seconds away. The camera captured him gesturing with his hands, his body language suggesting he was trying to explain his position about the $15. He was engaged in what he believed was a normal argument between roommates, completely unaware that Porter had already moved beyond words. The psychological disconnect between the two men in that moment is staggering. One person fighting for $15, the other person ready to kill over it. One person trying to resolve a minor conflict, the other person using that conflict as justification for premeditated murder. The surveillance footage preserved this terrifying imbalance of awareness and intent. Then came the moment that would be burned into the memory of everyone who watched the footage. Porter struck with a knife, stabbing Abdirahman once in the neck with deadly precision. The attack was swift, calculated, and devastatingly effective. This wasn't a wild, frenzied assault. This was a single, purposeful strike designed to kill. The camera captured Abdirahman's immediate response to the attack. In a heartbreaking display of human instinct, he assumed a fighting stance, his body preparing to defend itself against what he thought was the beginning of a physical altercation. For a brief moment, Abdirahman believed he could fight back, that he could survive whatever was happening to him. But then reality set in. The footage shows the exact moment when Abdirahman realized he had been stabbed. His fighting stance crumbled as he understood the severity of his wound. His hands moved to his neck, feeling the blood that was already beginning to flow. The look of confusion and terror on his face was captured forever by the unblinking camera lens. Porter's confession to police revealed a mind that operated on a completely different moral plane than most human beings. When he told investigators that he had been thinking about killing Abdirahman for weeks, he spoke with the same casual tone someone might use to discuss weekend plans. There was no shame, no regret, no recognition that what he was describing was the systematic planning of murder. The premeditation aspect of this crime transforms it from a tragic moment of poor judgment into something far more calculated and terrifying. Porter hadn't snapped at a moment of rage. He hadn't been pushed beyond his breaking point by a single incident. Instead, he had been methodically considering how and when to end his roommate's life, all while maintaining the facade of normal cohabitation. This level of premeditation requires a specific type of psychological detachment from human empathy. Porter was able to share meals with Abdirahman, engage in everyday conversations, and participate in the routine activities of shared living, all while secretly planning his murder. The ability to compartmentalize such dark intentions while maintaining normal social interactions suggests a deeply disturbed individual who had learned to hide his true nature. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of Porter's confession was his statement about the other roommates. The roommates were lucky they didn't get in the way. This single sentence reveals the true scope of his murderous intentions and the casual way he viewed human life. Lucky, as if their survival was merely a matter of circumstance, rather than his restraint. This statement suggests that Porter had developed a hierarchy of targets in his mind. Abdirahman may have been his primary focus, but the others were clearly on his radar as potential victims. The fact that he described their survival as luck implies that under different circumstances, or with different timing, multiple families could have been planning funerals instead of just one. The psychological implications of this mindset are staggering. Porter wasn't just planning to kill one person. He was mentally preparing himself to become a mass murderer within his own home. The apartment that should have been a sanctuary for young people trying to make their way in the world had become a hunting ground in Porter's twisted perception. His casual reference to their luck also reveals a complete lack of emotional connection to his potential victims. The psychological profile that emerges from Porter's confession is that of someone who had completely dehumanized the people around him. To plan multiple murders while living in close proximity to your intended victims requires a level of emotional detachment that most people cannot comprehend. Porter had somehow convinced himself that his roommates' lives were expendable, that their existence was subject to his whims and convenience. This type of mindset doesn't develop overnight. The ability to casually plan multiple murders suggests a gradual erosion of empathy and moral boundaries that likely took months or even years to fully manifest. Porter had probably been displaying warning signs long before the fatal stabbing, subtle indicators that his relationship with reality and human connection was deteriorating. The fact that he could maintain normal social interactions while harboring such dark intentions speaks to a sophisticated level of psychological manipulation. Porter had learned to wear a mask of normalcy while his true thoughts remained hidden beneath the surface. This ability to compartmentalize his murderous fantasies while functioning in everyday social situations makes him particularly dangerous. His confession reveals someone who had crossed a psychological threshold that most people never approach, let alone cross. Looking back at the events leading up to the murder, there were likely warning signs that went unnoticed or were dismissed as normal roommate tensions. The challenge with individuals like Porter is that they often become skilled at hiding their true intentions behind a facade of everyday normalcy. But certain behavioral patterns might have indicated the danger that was building beneath the surface. Changes in social interaction patterns, increased isolation, or unusual interest in violent content could have been early indicators. Perhaps Porter had become more withdrawn from group activities, or maybe he had started viewing his roommates with increased hostility over minor issues. The problem is that these signs can easily be mistaken for normal stress, financial pressure, or personality conflicts. The tragedy is that Abdirahman and the other roommates were living with a ticking time bomb without knowing it. They were going about their daily lives, sharing space and responsibilities with someone who was actively planning their deaths. The trust that naturally develops between people who share living space had been weaponized against them. Have you ever lived with someone who gave you bad vibes? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else recognize warning signs. The wheels of justice began turning swiftly after Porter's confession. He was formally charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, charges that carry the weight of a life sentence in Minnesota. The decision to file 2 separate counts reflects the prosecution's strategy to ensure that Porter faces the full consequences of his actions, with each count representing different legal theories about his intent and premeditation. Second-degree murder charges indicate that prosecutors believe Porter acted with intent to kill, but without the extensive premeditation required for first-degree murder. However, given his confession about planning the murder for weeks, legal experts suggest that additional charges could be filed as the case develops. The prosecution has built their case around Porter's own admissions, the surveillance footage, and the physical evidence found at the scene. Porter now sits in Hennepin County Jail, where he will remain until his trial. The legal system that he tried to evade with his brief flight from the scene has now caught up with him completely. The court set Porter's bond at $1 million, a figure that speaks volumes about how seriously the justice system views this crime. This astronomical amount isn't just about ensuring Porter doesn't flee before trial. It's a statement about the perceived danger he poses to society and the severity of his actions. A $1 million bond for a 21-year-old is virtually impossible to meet, effectively ensuring that Porter will remain behind bars until his case is resolved. The judge who set this amount clearly considered Porter's confession about planning to kill multiple roommates, viewing him as an ongoing threat to public safety. This bond amount also reflects the premeditated nature of the crime and Porter's casual attitude toward taking human life. The financial figure represents more than just legal procedure. It's the court's way of saying that someone who can kill over $15 and casually discuss murdering others cannot be trusted to remain free in society. The bond serves as both punishment and protection for the community. The impact on the surviving roommates cannot be overstated. These young people, who had simply been trying to share living expenses and build their lives, suddenly found themselves thrust into a nightmare they never could have imagined. They had been living with someone who viewed them as potential murder victims, sharing meals and conversations with a person who was actively planning their deaths. The psychological trauma of discovering that someone you trusted was planning to kill you creates wounds that may never fully heal. These survivors must now grapple with questions that have no satisfying answers. How long had Porter been planning their murders? What signs did they miss? Could they have saved Abdirahman if they had recognized the danger earlier? The surviving roommates also faced the burden of being witnesses in a murder trial, forced to relive the trauma repeatedly as the legal process unfolds. Their sense of safety and trust has been shattered in ways that will likely affect their future relationships and living situations for years to come. This case has sent shockwaves through the Minneapolis community and beyond, forcing people to confront uncomfortable truths about the potential dangers that can exist in seemingly normal living situations. The idea that someone could plan multiple murders while maintaining the facade of being a regular roommate challenges our basic assumptions about safety and trust. Roommate violence, while not uncommon, rarely reaches this level of premeditation and casual brutality. Most conflicts between people sharing living space involve disputes over chores, noise, or money that are resolved through communication or, at worst, someone moving out. Porter's case represents an extreme escalation that highlights how quickly domestic situations can turn deadly when mental health issues and violent tendencies go unaddressed. The broader implications extend beyond just roommate relationships. This case raises questions about how we screen people we choose to live with, what warning signs we should watch for, and how society can better identify individuals who pose a danger to those around them before tragedy strikes. While we cannot predict every dangerous situation, there are warning signs that should never be ignored when living with others. Pay attention to roommates who display excessive anger over minor issues, make threats even in jest, or show fascination with violence. Someone who isolates themselves while simultaneously monitoring your activities, or who responds to conflict with disproportionate rage, may pose a serious threat. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. If a roommate makes you uncomfortable, seems to enjoy others' distress, or talks casually about harming people, these are red flags that demand immediate attention. Document concerning behaviors and share your concerns with trusted friends or family members who can provide objective perspective. When conflicts arise, focus on de-escalation rather than winning arguments. Avoid cornering someone who seems agitated, and never engage with someone who appears to be under the influence or in an unstable mental state. Sometimes the best response to conflict is to remove yourself from the situation entirely and seek help from authorities or mediators. If you find yourself in a potentially dangerous living situation, contact local domestic violence hotlines, campus safety offices, or law enforcement for guidance. Many communities offer emergency housing assistance for people who need to leave unsafe living arrangements quickly. The National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 provides 24-hour support and resources. If this story opened your eyes to the dangers that can lurk in our everyday lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true crime stories that could save lives. Your awareness and vigilance could prevent the next tragedy.